We are live. Hello and welcome to Community Manager Live. I'm David Dewald, Community Manager at Sienna. Each week, we bring together a collection of community industry professionals to discuss a topic suggested by our audience. If you would like to chat along with us today, you can join us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitch, where we can pull your questions and comments right into our stream. If you prefer to just watch or listen, you can do so on all of those, plus Twitter. And you can find a link to all of those at the top of the page on the communitymanager.com. This week, our topic is hiring a community manager or community coach. And I'll lead off with Tim McDonald, let him introduce himself. We'll hit Vina, then we'll hit Deb and just go around the circle.
Yeah, so I'm Tim McDonald. I am the co-host with David here at Community Manager Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and am the head of community at homeroom.club.
Wonderful. My name is Samantha Venia Logan. I run a consultancy and e-course company specifically for teaching the social science of community, leveling up a lot of current community managers in order to understand the more complex going-ons of their communities. As a consultant, I kind of feel like having a discussion and having a consultant in any community manager's back pocket is a really important aspect of community that not a lot of people have talked about.
Cool. I'm Deb Shell. I am the founder of a company called Find Calm Here LLC. I do consulting for creators, leaders, and speakers, entrepreneurs, business owners to help them cultivate conversations and build authentic online communities with compassion and purpose. And I also am the host of the Community Strategy Podcast. We've got almost 100 episodes leading up to 100 episodes on community building from experts in the field of community building, celebrating that soon. And I'm excited to chat about my experiences building online communities and talking about community consultancy and coaching. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys. We're going to start off with kind of a, what do you feel like the difference is between, say, a community coach and a community consultant? Those kinds of things, just because to me, I see them as slightly different. For me, as a community coach, I think it would be like one-on-one with another community manager, helping them and supporting them and kind of being that, sounding board. But a consultant to me feels like much more involved. Your thoughts?
If I can start,
yeah.
I feel like they come from different backgrounds and they fulfill very, very different roles in business. In my knowledge, I have experienced that community coaches tend to be very interpersonal, very empathic, very connected to individual success. And that tends to permeate from the bottom up into other organizations. It's not to say that they don't provide concrete advice or build for organizations, but I think that a community coach is very bottom up and focused on individual success, while a community consultant is more looking at the ecosystem that's involved in closed stakeholders, wider stakeholders. They tend to be a lot more tactical in nature, and they tend to focus a lot more on solving red tape or concluding problems. And in that way, a coach is very hands-on with an individual, while a consultant is very hands-on with the actual infrastructure of the business.
I like that. I'll just share that I think the head is where we focus when we talk about consulting, the strategic business aspects of how is this going to work? What's our launch plan? Strategy around community growth, leadership, expectations aligning with business goals. Those are heady kind of conversations. And that's where I think the strategic and consulting roles lie, whereas coaching is around the heart and getting more connected with purpose, passion, motivation, real outcomes of what are we trying to accomplish here? Are we getting the results that we're looking for? If not, how can we navigate around that, and kind of workshopping with conversations with people. I've been in a coaching role and a consultant role, and those are different conversations with different people typically. So, and sometimes they can be with the same person. Sometimes you need to coach the person you're working as a consultant with. So I think there's interdispersed ways to look at this. But yeah, I think coaching is really more focused around empowering the other person to really dig into how to pull out their really great ideas. And I think a really great coach can find unique opportunities to highlight that individual and like really and lift them up and feel like giving them the confidence. I think it's more about confidence building, whereas consultancy is more around strategic analyzation and observation and experience and giving them direction. Like, okay, here, phase 1, here's the goal. Phase 2, here's what we're doing, and keeping kind of everybody on the same page and trying to wrangle them in when they want to go to phase 3, and you're like, but we're not there yet. We're in phase 1. Let's stick there for now. So I think that's like the different roles. Tim, it looks like he has some thoughts there. I'll pass it over there.
No, I was just thinking, because I don't have too much experience in coaching or consulting, although some people might argue that with me. But I was just kind of curious as I was listening to both your answers, and Deb, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but is there a time and a place where an organization would want to hire both a consultant and a coach?
Yes. The answer is yes.
If I may, I want to offer a third option as well, because I feel like there are differences in interplays between a community coach and a community consultant, whereas we are essentially staking a place that says this is our expertise, but that doesn't mean that we don't cross over. And I think that there is a third option here, especially when it comes to the amalgamation of jobs being expected from consultants and coaches. So there's also the option of mentors. Being a community mentor, regardless of your specialization and regardless of your setup, is using a collection of both of the same skills. For instance, because I'm a community consultant, I don't really spend a lot of time trying to beef up or amp up the capacity of a specific community manager. But as a mentor, I do take on a lot of community managers, and they have the freedom to ask questions about analytics, or they have freedom to ask questions about how to get buy-in for their company. So I think that regardless of which side you are on, there is this concept of being a mentor that can kind of connect the two.
I agree. I think that's great points to say that mentorship is another opportunity to continue practicing. I think starting out, if we're going to phase this into something like this, people could see on a timeline. It might look something like you get a consultant to kind of help the leadership team, if you're a business or an organization, help the leadership team with guidance around what does it mean to build a community, or what is this community going to be for us as an organization, and strategically, what's that look like over the next 6, 9, 12 months, and then bringing in maybe a full-time hire that would kind of work alongside that consultant. That's kind of been working well for some of my clients, is that we first have the leadership team on some calls, get the vision and the strategy, the community canvas, as they say. I know that it's a familiar term for a lot of people. Get the community canvas kind of sorted out, so we have a vision. And then when we hire on a community manager, then we can guide that community manager through teaching them and training them, coaching them on maybe best practices around guiding people as a community manager. And then later mentorship, gives that other opportunity for continued growth as they're going along. So I think those are all opportunities.
Yeah, I do like that you brought that up, because as a consultant, I've noticed that there are significantly more structured timelines and expectations from executives that go beyond the community manager role. Whereas a lot of coaches tend to have a more ethereal, kind of go with the flow kind of timeline that is very focused on the individual team or department, that kind of thing. So I think timeline and rigidity and structure in what you promise and offer is a very big difference too.
I'm learning here, so this is great. Yeah, because I'm one of those. I work at a company. I don't ever have to contract out to anybody. So yeah, this is fascinating to me. Sorry.
Good.
Yeah.
Don't be sorry. I'm glad we're sharing our
Yeah, this is good.
experiences that are
So
helpful.
yeah, I mean, I learn every
Because if they're
time
helpful
we
for
do
you, then
these.
maybe one of the two, or more other people are going to
That's
benefit.
right.
So
That's right. That's the goal, is to get people to better understand what you guys do and how you do it.
Yeah.
I guess, hey, how did you get started at doing this, right? Because maybe there's somebody out there that's maybe in between jobs, maybe, they're thinking about, going into community management, want to know how to get started as far as contracting or being a coach to someone. How did you set that up? How did you get that started?
I started mine by building my own community. So I decided to launch my own community in 2020 during the summer of the pandemic and the crazy Black Lives Matter movement and lots of other things that were happening at that time, which was probably not the best time to launch anything. But I launched it for a purpose of bringing people together in a challenging and stressful time. And my community is called Find Calm Here. And it was all about helping people find calm in daily life. And over the process of the 2020 launch in the summer and through the next 6 months, I hosted over 30 virtual events. I learned how to recruit speakers and talk with people. I hosted a virtual summit with 15 speakers and just learned so much. And at the end of all of that journey, I didn't have any money. And so basically what I learned was people actually will pay you to build a community if you can do that. So because of my experience learning and the platform I had been working on, it was Mighty Networks. And so that's because I had some platform expertise and understanding around the technical aspects of and the challenges. Plus I have a background in journalism and writing. That gave me these skills and the knowledge, but I didn't have formal training in being a community builder, with the exception of my experience of bringing people together in person. And I had done in-person events, and then I transitioned to doing virtual ones. So that's kind of how I got started, was like this weird way of, I got started by consulting because people just started reaching out. Like you're saying, David, people are starting to reach out and ask you. I think this is going to become much more common in the next 6 months, 12 months going down.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And I'm actually coming from a completely different area and still came to the same conclusions that this is going to be a thing, very much so. And my background, I've been building communities since I accidentally created my first one back in 2011, 2012 on YouTube. I published a queer-centric channel on YouTube and ended up with 4,400 queer people who weren't out yet, not able to live authentically, hadn't quite been able to come into their identities. And I'm like, I don't know how to run this. What do I do? And perhaps foolishly, but very advantageously, I went to college because it's like, they should know, right? And they had no idea what to do with me. They're like, journalism, communication, business, definitely anthropology. So I just took them all. And I feel very, very fortunate to have had an incredible academic advisor who was willing to work with me to essentially trailblaze a degree path of my own in a specialty in virtual worlds. So I came from a very structured academic background of understanding the anthropology and communication in online spaces. And then I went and I learned marketing because despite knowing how communities work, I didn't know how the internet itself worked. So I went there, and that landed me several community-centered jobs in academia and nonprofit. So I spent a long time there, and I kind of came out of the pandemic going, I've spent enough time trying to build these communities, struggling with the red tape in these highly traditional academic circumstances, specifically with a company called Keystone Symposia on molecular and cellular biology, where I was building a series of different smaller communities around events and summits. So we were running 63 events in any given season, 4 months each. And the challenge was convincing those individuals to continue their research, continue their conversations before and after their individual conferences. So I learned that each step of the way, the business kept asking me to do marketing over and over and over. And I'm like, my heart is in community. So this past February, I'm a little bit younger than Deb is in regards to my business. I have existed for about 7 months doing a lot of consultations, focusing on solving that kind of red tape.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, I think, I can tell you that UT Austin at one point in Texas had a course on community management, a single class. Maybe it was 101, 102. Yeah, the only reason I know that is because they had me come in as a guest speaker at one point for that, just to talk to the class and talk about what I did and where I did it and that kind of thing. But to my knowledge, there is definitely not there might be social media management courses out there now, like in college, but I don't know if there's a degree in social media management.
Well, fun fact, Georg Link with the Chaos Project over in Omaha, Nebraska, started one specifically on open source DevOps and OSPOs. So I think that's currently in development at the moment.
But as a career, we all know that it's multi, sociology.
The common thread is that there's no direct line.
Yeah. Well, there's no
community professionalism
and there's so many different, you have to be familiar with social dynamics. You have to be familiar with, how people interpersonal skills. You have to be, there's this whole skill set. It's a weird skill set, and you have to get bits and pieces, right? So like if you're, and even within individuals, right? Like I am terrible at writing. I just am not good at it. I sit in front of a blank page and it just stares back at me. I can never get my thoughts out. I'm much better at off the cuff speaking, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. But there's so many little skill sets that you need to know, you don't need to know HTML like you needed to know it 10 years ago, because the platforms have gotten a whole lot better at holding your hand through getting things done. But it's good to know HTML, graphic design. Maybe you need to know some video skills. You don't have to be, top of the line in that, but you should know how it works and how it gets done. And I can't see a course that would be able to fit all of that in. It'd be like 15 101s, social media 101, HTML 101, computer programming 101. And it would, that's never going to get you a degree.
I also kind of want to push back on that a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think that a large majority of the reason the role of a community manager has become such a discovery pathway, and also a large majority of the reason community managers are requiring a high breadth of skills. Don't get me wrong, running a community requires that. But I also think the industry as itself, being an online community manager, places all of these hats on you. And it's this industry expectation that I don't think is going to stick. And the majority of the reason is because we're already seeing this huge split on the journey of a community manager, from a community facilitator to a community admin to a community coordinator, a community manager, community architect. And we're starting to see not just this progression in skill set, but also this specialization that also occurred in marketing. To be a T-shaped marketer is to say that you know about SEO, you know about email management, you know about metrics and analytics dashboards, you know about all of these different paths, but there is one that you choose to specialize in. Right. And I think that eventually we're going to be able to make community a teachable industry, if only for the fact that we are going to narrow down into those specific specializations to make it more structured and to make it easier.
Oh yeah, I definitely fall into the more builder. Category, just give me a blank slate and let me build from there. So much so that, I've said this in the past, that I took a job where the community already existed because I had never done that before. And I felt like that was a gap in my knowledge. So, coming into a community that already exists and challenging myself to restructure it, reformulate it, reinvigorate it, was something that I felt the need to do, because I can build a community and make it successful. I've done it a bunch of times, but to do something that I haven't done before, to have that knowledge just felt important to me. So, any other comments on that? How you got started?
I think there's other ways of getting experience and education than formal education. I want to just point that out. I took certification programs. I've learned a lot on my own. I networked with people. I've spent hours and hours building relationships with people who I trust and know, and so and get to know over time. And so part of what you're talking about is being a generalist. And I've been a generalist pretty much all of my life. I went to school for photography, got my bachelor's degree in photojournalism, spent a ton of time, almost a decade of my life, trying to make a living as a journalist, and making less than $20,000 a year is not a way to be able to pay back my student loans, and struggling with that. And I got a certification just this year about becoming a UMAP coach. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with UMAP, but basically it's kind of, it takes the Clifton strengths and uses your top strengths and also has assessments for values and skills. And what the outcome is you get this report that kind of shows you, what your strengths are, what you really enjoy doing, what lights you up versus what burns you out, and then how you relate and interact, and how you can set up specific boundaries and of your how you best work with people, so that you can then speak with potential clients or customers and say, so here's the way I work. When people ask me, how do you work with others, I can share that exactly with them and say, I'm a really great communicator. My top 5 strengths are communication, winning others over, positivity, futuristic, and restorative. So I can share more of that later, but just to say that there's lots of different ways coaches and consultants get their experience and background, and only one of those is through formal education. Which is recently, I just asked on my podcast, the Community Strategy Podcast, I interviewed Taylor Harrington, who's the director of community at Groove, and I asked her this question, and she actually reposted on Twitter and LinkedIn about the question because of how she defined her experience, which is really interesting. So,
yeah, and I also want to kind of approach that as well from an academic standpoint, where it's like, just because we don't have vettable peer review systems for learning doesn't mean community managers have not learned and become experts in our craft. We found other ways. And honestly, for those who are new to this industry, thinking about consulting, thinking about coaching, thinking about getting their first community role, the best and easiest way to learn, this has always been the case for all of human history, has been community. Going out, finding those people. So what I do recommend, in lieu of not having a proper degree from an accredited university, is to just go find 3 people that can teach you, 3 people who are in your current standpoint, and 3 people you think you can help. That's already 9 people in your corner. That is a community where you are capable of learning. You don't need accreditation. You just need to build a community and then show that you can.
Yeah, I think as an industry, if you ever ask any community manager, can I get 5 minutes of your time? Can I ask you some questions? Can I get a little help on this? I don't think anybody would tell you no. For that.
I will challenge that. I will agree with you mostly, but I will challenge you in that there are a few people, but I will say those people are more interested in themselves than community. And that should be a sign, that you probably don't want to be. If you truly want to be part of community, you won't get that response. But if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not talking about them coming in and, being, trying to help you out as like be a coach or, you know, that kind of thing. But if you have like can I get 5 minutes with you? Can I buy you a coffee and ask you a couple questions? I don't think many would turn you down. There may be a few that will, you know, charge you $10,000 to show up to something. But you know, that's just how they roll. So, all right. So kind of back on track. That was great though. We just hit a lot of great points as far as, you know, learning community, which is, you know, a good topic, always a good topic in my opinion. And look, Bill J has joined us. I'm going to bring him in. So, hey, Bill, welcome to our little party. If you would mind, I'm going to give you a big spot up here. Tell us who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Absolutely. So Bill Johnston, I have a small consultancy called Structure 3C to help mostly enterprise software companies with community strategy. And I am doing it I am a recent California transplant and now in Reno, Nevada, just south of Lake Tahoe.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I know you're a little late. Our last question was, how did you get started? As a coach or consultant, if you want to tackle that, great. If you want me to just kind of move on to the next one, I can.
No, I'd love to if there's some airtime.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so in 2015, I was on my second tour of duty at Autodesk, and I love the company, still love the company, but it occurred to me that I had pushed on all the stuff that I was going to make a big impact within Autodesk for a couple of years. Like we had launched new strategies, platforms. We were, you know, experimenting with community supported trials and things like that. And so it occurred to me, like, I'd like to be doing this, but for, you know, 4 or 5 brands at the same time, really, because I have a very short attention span. And so I, you know, talked to the folks. I talked to my manager at the time, who's now the CEO, and I was like, I kind of think I went out. And so you know, we agreed on a soft landing, and you know, I launched Structure on the ferry back from San Francisco after that conversation. And by the time I landed, I had the name, I had the URL, and I had a short list of offerings, and was off and running from there. And I have to say, like, the group of folks, the community of community leaders at the time on the brand side were incredibly generous to me. I had a couple of leads almost immediately. So a former Dell colleague who was then at Intuit pulled me in for my first gig there, and was off and running.
Very good. Very good. And that's perfect. You know, you said you came up with a few offers. That's our next question. What are the typical services that you offer? Bill, if you want to start it off, since you were right there.
Sure. And I appreciate everyone for letting me kind of jump in and roll here. So typically, like, after experimenting with a lot of different offerings, we take kind of a research and design working session approach to things. So it's really like our main offering is going from either cold start on strategy, which frankly is fairly rare at this point, to understanding current state of an organization strategy, usually multiples, right? Because there have been acquisitions or what have you, like multiple teams owning community, and kind of, you know, taking that, doing a ton of research with all the identified stakeholders and some of the stakeholders that we identify, and getting from kind of that state to a new playbook. And then taking the playbook, really working hard to understand how the programs play out, what resources are available or could be available, how they want to prioritize things, and then really helping them stand up what we're calling a community programs office, which is essentially like this transformational entity within an organization that kind of owns and coordinates and herds the cats around the community programs until they're up and running and you know, not self-sustaining, but sustaining and in motion, right? And they have executive oversight. So it's really that kind of playbook to program office. And then there are a couple of areas that we will come back in and specialize on from a program perspective. So that's community-based advocacy, community-based innovation being the top two. We're starting to do some marketplace work, but that's kind of the core of the offering.
Very good.
Over on my end, I'm actually very similar. But like I said, my focus is primarily on leveling up community architecture where things are started. So oftentimes I'll start with an accidental community that an influencer has built. In some cases, like Dan the Fireman, a really well-known influencer in the motorcycle space, worked to kind of develop and restructure that community. And a large majority of my focus is on finding businesses that have developed communities that are ready to grow and structure, and then walking them through the pathway to finding that way of building a strategy that listens to community members, implementing a social listening plan, implementing a proper strategy, and carrying that forward into community roles and development, and then ending that with a solid structure specifically for data flow, metrics, and analytics. So my job is more or less about solidifying the online community. And then on the other end, I use those case studies and I use that development in order to train online community managers that I might place into those situations. And then from that point forward, we just report out. Iterative community requires that content comes out on the back end, which is where the e-course portion comes in.
And so I guess it's my turn. I'm up next. I just commented about changing the notes. So thanks.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So I was all over the place when I first started 2 years ago. I started doing actual community design and community architecture in the beginning, based on my experience around Mighty Networks platform that I have been working on with my own community. And so then I branched out to strategy and started really doing more strategic planning, with a focus on ideal member interviews. So based on my background of journalism and reporting, I really find that the things that people need most are community content when they're starting out promoting their community. And so I work with people who are in the starter stage of just getting the community. Maybe they either have a community concept and they need clarity on it. So I work with them around the strategy. Maybe they've got the community concept and strategy figured out, but now they're trying to figure out how to promote and market this to their audience or how they're going to bring people here. And so I work with people with that, with ideal member interviews, interviewing potential customers, ideal members that would be a good fit to understand their problems, how this community is going to solve those problems, take that and repackage that in and help them put together a marketing plan and implementation strategic opportunity. So that's a part of another offer that I have. And then coaching is the third component of what I do. So more focus now on the strategic and then the content and then the coaching of those really foundational things that create bonds in community and create belonging. And that's just talking about how do we really build this space and create it as a place of belonging where people feel like they are valued, seen, and heard. And so I think those are the ways that I've been really enjoying working with clients and customers. The leadership with companies that I work with is more focused on the strategic questions and like when is this going to happen? And we've been pushing back with some clients that we've had around, well, we need to know the purpose and we need to know who these ideal members are, and we've really got to talk with them. So I've just in one client we're recently working with, it's just been this push of, well, when are we going to get the committee launched? It's like, but we need to do it in a right way. And so when you're working with clients, there's you got to do a little bit of pushback and be like, okay, well, but here's what we need to have a successful community. And, when people have, like right now, we have a client that we're working with that is a director of a community, and the community hasn't been built yet. It's not, there's nothing we're still in strategy phase, and she's getting pushback from leadership. So I'm in a coaching role with her and then a strategic role with the leadership team. So I think we play many hats, as we talked about earlier. but the services that I offer are those three components of the strategy, the content, and then the coaching aspect.
Yeah, and to kind of bounce off of that, I also kind of feel like between all three of us as community consultants, there's been this trend that I do want to call out as a very, very important skill if you're going to go into consultation. A really big part of our jobs is convincing people to slow down, to have deliberative discussions with themselves in small groups, and also interface deliberative discussions at scale with the wider audience that they plan to galvanize into a community. I think it is so, so, so very important that that deliberative planning phase is not skipped. And the primary aspect of a consultant is making sure that those comments and those plans actually go really well. So you can see that all three of us have a very specific emphasis on how to get people to talk about their core values, goals, experiences, and coming to ground on community with community members.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway from all of that. It's perfect. Our next question. Are there any questions you wish your clients would ask you that you generally have to lead them into or bring up for them? I don't know who wants to go first. I saw a couple of people excited about it. So
I can say it really quick because I literally just said it.
Okay.
How do you have discussions around tough problems instead of forging forward with answers that you've just kind of assumed or inferred? Like, I would really, really love to just hear from my clients right from the get-go, but how do we figure that out? How do we prove it? How do we ask them?
I mean, I think for me, there are a few. One would be, what else should we be doing, as opposed to the preconceived notion of like, there's this very specific business function we want community for, and that's it. And so if you could just go do that and let us know when it's done, that would be great. That's a huge red flag for me. And then the second one would be something to the tune of, how might we cooperate with, peers and frenemies in the industry, right? Like, I think one of the biggest untapped opportunities in the space that I'm working in is more cooperative or federated approaches to community, right, amongst larger brands, right? Like, I'll pick on Intuit because they're no longer a customer. I feel like they missed a huge opportunity when we were working on a community related to QuickBooks targeted at small businesses, because they just wanted it to be like all QuickBooks all the time. And we were like, actually, people don't want to talk about QuickBooks all the time. They want to talk about how they're running their small business. And like, that's a tiny fraction of it. And I also shared, when I'm in QuickBooks, it's like incredibly stressful for me. Like, I don't enjoy it at all. So, we came back unsolicited with a more of a federated network plan for, well, if these are the needs of a small business owner, then maybe you could partner with X to fulfill the need around, real-time advice on things like pricing or whatever. And they never bid on it. And so I just feel like those, like, being willing to think beyond the domains of your brand, I guess, and see what possibilities are out there beyond that, I think takes a huge step towards serving the whole person that is the customer, as opposed to just hyper focusing on your little slice of their attention. And, God forbid, could help like further humanize the brand.
That's always a fun problem to have.
We're talking about communities. That's about people, human beings. Let's remember that, guys. Gals, everyone in the room. Like, community is about people.
Yeah, this is not a plug. I want to be super clear, but I'm actually running a course specifically about converting traditional brands to magnetic brands, because I am so tired of having to have the stronger discussion of like, but we can't put a community manager in front of things. They need to represent the brand. And I'm like, no, you need multiple different voices as people get closer, because your brand can't be a person anymore. Your brand is a group of individuals that people want to get to know.
A few questions I would love to hear is how can I be a part of this project, or what are the expectations, or what's my role in this, or what are the expectations for me? Because I feel like a lot of times the person shows up on a strategy session and they're like, "What's Deb doing for me?" Versus what's Deb gonna do? Like, I'm excited to learn what all the work Deb's gonna do, and it's like, well, it's a teamwork kind of a situation. I can only do so many things, and I can't do everything. It's also about what's in it for them is another question. What's in it for the community members instead of just what's in it for the business? So it's another question I would love to hear. And how can we stay in our own box? Let's just stay here with what our goal is. One of my clients is like constantly getting bombarded by everybody walking in the hallways, sending her email. Hey, did you see the podcast about community building? Hey, there's a new book out about community building. Hey, you should check out this website because this person is really, talking about how to have a really successful community. Did you go in that Facebook group that I sent you last week? 1,700 other distractions to distract her away from the fact that, no, we actually are working on a community strategy for us, this company, us, not what everybody else is doing. And there's a really big tendency right now to look at what everybody else is doing. And I've said it many times to myself this week and to other people, comparison is the thief of joy. It will smash it every time. And it will like lead you in a down spiral if that is what you're dealing with, of like people in your organization just constantly telling you, here's the latest podcast about community building. Well, podcasts are great. I'm not going to say that podcasts aren't good. They're amazing. But there's times and places for when you put learning into place. And so I think a lot of people are looking to the left or the right and trying to see what other people are doing and what's working and how can we replicate that, instead of what is our purpose? What are we going to try to accomplish with this community? Why does it matter to our customers, to our colleagues, to us? And I think those are the questions I would say.
I was gonna say, I like the question of, what's in it for me, meaning what's in it for the users of the community. Back when I was job hunting for community management roles, I got into, it was like a first interview. I was talking to the exec that was hiring. He had just gotten the okay to build a community. It was a SaaS product. And, you could go to their website and do this thing as kind of a proof of concept. And so, I did my part of it. I looked at what they had and what they did and where they did it. And I was like, he's like, I just got it. I'm so excited. I'm going to do this. And I'm like, what's in it for the community? And it just floored him. He was like, what? And he goes, he had told me we're going to be getting data from the customers. We're going to be pulling in information. We're going to have all this great information. I'm like, what's in it for the customers? And he goes, well, they can go to the website and do this thing. And I said, but they can do this thing now. What's going to bring them to the community? What's going to have them not do it there and do it here instead? What's the value? And he didn't have an answer. And I declined that job before we got off the phone, which I think threw him for a loop, because I don't think he expected me to say, I don't want to work for you. But they didn't have a clue. I mean, they didn't even have the concept. And yeah, I could have been the guy that walked him through that, but that's not what I was looking for at the time. But yeah, I think that's always important, even when you're like me, working for a company. What's the value for the customer? What's the value for the community? And generally there is a value there, and it's easy to point to, hopefully easy to point to, whether that's support, customer service, documentation. There's the value there, and it's just a matter of determining what it is and making sure that you're addressing it well. Let's see. This one actually a question from Reddit. It is, how do you find new clients, or how do they find you? This was someone that was getting started as a consultant, and I said, hey, I've got this thing coming up, and they said, well, there's my question. So it's educational_basket26 on Reddit is their username. But yes, how do you find new clients, or how do they find you?
I can go.
Go.
But also, because my brain works in weird and funny ways, I thought of another question I would love clients to ask, which is,
Oh,
how do we plan for and sustain, how do we like essentially commit to and plan for resources beyond like the initial expense of the community platform and kind of the launch and the initial excitement, right? Because that's another key area that often goes unnoticed. For clients, you know, when I started Structure, it was a lot of word of mouth, right? Because they're, you know, the economy was doing really well. Most community folks that I know or knew at the time were in roles, right? So I was like one of the odd people out consulting. Things have shifted now, so it's, you know, it's a lot more competitive and there's a lot more noise. So I've shifted from like 100% relying on word of mouth and referral to doing a bit more, I guess, marketing, in the sense that I've started to publish more of like our frameworks, methodologies, and research to a certain extent as lead gen to start a conversation. Frankly, it hasn't, you know, been incredibly effective. So I'm just trying to be really honest with everyone. I'm taking a second look at it. I have noticed like a good chunk of the folks that register are other consultants. So frankly, I'm thinking about developing an offering for consultants at this point. But yeah, I mean, I think like tapping your network for referrals is where I would start as someone who's just starting, and then, you know, show what you have, and if appropriate, like, you know, ask for a few bits of information so you can follow up and view it as the start of a conversation. I haven't done any paid marketing or anything like that. And I guess the last thing is I do a quarterly mastermind style event for customers and prospects where we go deep on like something we've been studying or something that's of interest to the group that may be on the edge. Like we've done things like, what's the role of machine learning and automation for communities moving forward, and what are the best examples of community-based advocacy programs, and like doing a deep dive for like a couple of hours once a quarter. So that could also be like a way to do business development. But I'm super interested to hear what everyone else has.
I've honestly found that structuring what you've been doing has been working best for me. So I use a content relationship flywheel. If you're familiar with Pablo Gonzalez, he'd be familiar with this. I didn't really have that terminology until I met Pablo. But I use an iterative community framework where I bring people in to have discussions, which counts as an onboarding path and a long-term development. And then I turn those discussions into content and learning that ensures people recognize my expertise in my industry. So it's always about building a community that includes happenings, gatherings, practices, and ritual, and then turning all of that into artifacts of those discussions. So if you think about low context platforms, what that means is chats and systems that you come in and you're like, what's going on? There's way too much happening. So chat rooms, Discord, Slack. You want to build those because it creates a sense of belonging and happiness. And then you want to turn that into a high context platform. Someone can hop on and immediately get and understand the context of the platform. And the criticality of that is that that platform needs to be very high in viewability on social, and it needs to be SEOable. And by doing so, by having this content relationship flywheel running, it becomes a lot easier for you to meet people organically at scale and build the relationships necessary to say, this person knows what they're talking about, let's sign them on.
I have a completely different path than anybody here, I think.
It's good. It's good.
So what I would say is when I first started, as I mentioned, I started building on the Mighty Networks platform, and they have a community of hosts, and I primarily posted in there, and I got referrals and clients through their community. The biggest lesson I learned was not to ever just use a platform. The biggest learning lesson I had there was that was not the great that was not a good partner for me to partner with. And I learned my lesson around that. And so I've been stepping away from ID networks, closing my community, and being more agnostic around community platforms in general, building relationships with multiple platforms and understanding, what makes them different, because that's typically one of the number one questions I get is, what platform? And my answer is, it doesn't matter about the platform. It really is more important on what your strategy and your structure and your architecture is going to be. There's features and functions, and there's new platforms coming out every day. So it's a lot easier to identify a platform once you know your structure and your community strategy before going forward. But I'm transitioning as we speak now, and one of the things that I did was, because I haven't had a lot of experience in the community profession, I reached out to people on LinkedIn and said, who is doing this thing called community consulting? This was about a year ago in August of 2021. I started connecting with those people. We met virtually once a month for a year. It's now called the Community Consultants Collective. And we just decided to formalize it after the year of meeting together. We put together an advisory board. And so, and we just had our first session like last week about that. So this is all kind of new, but we see that there's an opportunity here as community consultants to offer a space of collaboration over competition. And that we talked a little bit in the beginning about niches, that we all kind of serve different clients or customers, and we all have kind of a different niche or approach to it. So I think that that's one of the things that I've learned is who's in your support network. And that's how, honestly, how a lot of clients I've been getting in the last couple of months has been through the network of relationships I've built with people in the profession, because many of the consultants that are like the name drop people that we might be thinking of when we think about consultants, like Richard Millington, which, David Spinks, Carrie Melissa Jones, those people are like maxed out. They can only take we're all human beings that can only take a certain amount of clients, which means that there's dribblings down a pipeline for opportunities for people who aren't getting all of those leads all of the time. So I think the more we band together and build these relationships is going to really offer an expansion of this space for community managers and consultants and coaches. And hopefully we have those tiers, and we have lots of them, because everybody really could benefit from each level, like we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah, and you're absolutely, I was going to say, you're absolutely right about some of the bigger, well-known people not having bandwidth. Some of them had maybe possibly committed to joining us today, but they couldn't because client stuff came up. I know Bill was a little late because he had client stuff coming up, and totally get that. I'm not picking on anybody specifically, but yeah, it's going to be, some people are just going to get a lot of traffic because they're so well known in the industry.
Yeah, and I think one of the things community as an industry just gets, because we came out of this phenomenon on the internet, is we understand at our integral base that there is a notion of co-opetition and collaboration, development, experience, and creativity among one another, even if we're viewed as competitors, creates an abundance mindset that lengthens the space. And I love how Lais de Oliveira says so in her book, Hacking Communities. There is this notion by connecting of an abundance mindset that we're capable of increasing the space. When people are forced to compete in a finite space, the point is not to win and take resources from people, it's to expand the space.
Very good.
I think that's a very enlightened way to look at it. I don't know that everyone shares that perspective.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that is an amazing and beautiful way, and that's how I believe as well. But I feel like that's, consultancy is still a challenge. It's still a business, and it's still a challenging space to be. And there are people that are far more ahead of me, and there are people behind me. And so I feel like that's okay, and that's the way it should be. That's great. It's great that there are these people that can lead, that led to the space where we are now. I'm thankful for them, and that many of them have shared their time and wisdom with me at parts of times when I needed a question or had a challenge. So I think all of that goes back to where we started with, like, how to, what do you think the difference is between consulting and coaching? And then Venya offered about mentorship, adding mentorship to the component there. And I think, that's how these kind of roles can expand and grow. And we will see less competition over time. I hope, anyway. That's my
it's also happening with
rosy
software.
colored glasses.
All right.
Rosy colored glasses. I love it.
Did you know, this is trivia for the show, that people that wear rose-colored glasses actually have rose-colored dreams? True. So on that
I feel
weird
like you
note,
just made that up.
I didn't. It's true.
Is that a Sapir-Whorf hypothesis thing?
I don't know. It's just I have a so you know how if you've ever seen Sherlock Holmes, they'll sometimes mention a memory palace where everything's in a
Yes.
certain room and in a certain drawer and a certain basket. So my wife is convinced that I have a memory junkyard. There's just random
That's
stuff
awesome.
all over the place, and occasionally something will pop out. And the rose-colored glasses with rose-colored dreams. Yes. So we've got about 4 minutes left. I'll do this. Usually it's we'll go around the horn. But if you have any final thoughts, throw those in there. But please tell our audience. And I'm going to put you in big head mode. So, let's get this down here like that. Tell us, Deb. Any final thoughts on the call today, obviously, and call on the stream today, and where you are, how people can get a hold of you, how people can possibly hire you, and just all the places to get a hold of you and be in contact with you.
So my name's Deb. I am the founder of FindCalm Here LLC, consulting business based in central Pennsylvania. And you can go to findcalmhere.com, and that has links to all the things that I'm doing. The blog, the podcast, the Community Strategy podcast is airing. I just announced that it will be ending at the end of 2022, and we're celebrating the final 10 episodes with me sharing who is coming up on these episodes. Risher Millington is one, as well as David Siegel, the CEO of Meetup, which he will be our episode 100. Nice. So super excited about those things that are coming up. But I'll say, if you're thinking about coaching or consulting, or even if you're a community manager finding yourself in a space of unemployment or just kind of in between things, all of us are always happy to chat. So feel free to just email me or contact me on LinkedIn. And we're always welcome to chat about this stuff because we're very open about it, obviously. And then if you're really interested, book a call with me and let's chat about the Community Consulting Collective that we meet every first Wednesday of each month at 12 p.m. Eastern time on Zoom. So if that's of interest to you, we've got a nice group of people that have been meeting pretty regularly, and we have pretty candid conversations around what it looks like to start a consulting business. So that's me.
Very good. Dania?
So if you want to follow me, I am readily available on LinkedIn or Twitter on a public area. But the best place to stay in contact with me is going to be either my Discord. You can join that on my website, or my YouTube channel, which is specifically about socially constructed online, bringing social science into online community to level up your community spaces. That having been said, the Discord and YouTube are all available on my website, where you can also see my services. Contact me and you'll always get a free consultation specifically for your business. And if you just want to talk about how to land your first community role, that's not going to be a consultation. That's just a mentorship I'm totally happy to offer for free. So just contact me at sociallyconstructed.online. I'm more than happy to talk.
And Bill, thank you for joining us. I know that you had a prior commitment. I appreciate you, coming.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for thinking of me, and for you all being willing to include me coming in late. So Bill Johnston, you can find our work at Structure3C. So the word structure, the number 3, the letter C.com, for the kind of framework downloads that I mentioned, and an overview of our services, which I'm in the process of updating. And then more raw and maybe like more historical posts can be found at billjohnston.io. So I have kind of resuscitated my blog, and I'm trying to get more of the sort of early community roundtable stuff from the Bay Area and the community-owned conferences from the mid-2000s. I'm trying to bring some of that stuff back because it's amazing how many conversations keep coming back up, as you all probably know. You know, from an advice perspective, I would say if you're starting and you feel slightly out of sync with a lot of the common wisdom that you're seeing broadcast, you are probably onto something. so follow that. And in particular, like I'm happy to talk to anyone anytime. But especially if you're in the enterprise and you're struggling with next steps or evaluating roles, like I've been there, and I'm always happy to chat, honestly, because I know how hard that can be sometimes.
Tim?
I'm Tim McDonald, the head of community at homeroom.club, and we don't do consulting, but we don't mind partnering with consultants because we provide all the technology, stack builds, and implementations to help the business objectives in the community get there. And you can find me at TA McDonald on Twitter or Tim A. McDonald on LinkedIn. And appreciate all of three of you being here. It's just been great to listen in and learn so much because I'm not in that space. So I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same thing. All right. I want to thank our guests today and my co-host, Tim McDonald, for joining us. And thank you to our audience. We had some good questions come in today. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe on the platform of your choice and follow. If you would like to be a guest on an upcoming episode or have a topic you would like us to cover, please head over to thecommunitymanager.com, click the About Us page, hit the Contact Us, and just send us what you want to talk about. Again, thank you to our guests for viewing, and thank you to everybody who's watching. We'll see you next week.